So welcome to this interview series. This is the first in a series of interviews that will be on the theme of neo-humanism. And neo-humanism it's derived from yoga, from a yoga perspective, which holds that everything is part of the same consciousness. Human beings, plants, animals. And we as human beings are at our best when we can create conditions for everybody to have a happy and fulfilling life. And that goes for animals and plants as well. So today we're going to be talking about animals and their rights in this world. Before we start discussing that, I'd like to introduce you to a chant. And the meaning of the chant is Bhavanam Kevalam, and it means that love is the essence of everything. The idea is that behind my existence, behind every existence, is love, goodwill, untiring support. And we are at our best when we reflect that goodwill out there in the world. So Bhavanam Kevalam is just a way of tuning into that, putting aside everything else and just tuning into what is the most basic thing before anything else, before I think or feel or do anything. So here we go with a little Bhavanam Kevalam.
Kevalam Bangaar, Rabin Bangaar, Kevalam Bangaar, Rabin Bangaar, Kevalam Bangaar, Rabin Kevalam. Rabin Kevalam, Rabin Kevalam, Bhavanam Kevalam, Rabin Kevalam, Bhavanam Kevalam, Rabin Kevalam. Bhavanam Kevalam, Rabin Kevalam, Rabin Kevalam, Rabin Kevalam, Bhavanam Kevalam, Rabin Kevalam, Bhavanam Kevalam, Rabin Kevalam, Bhavanam Kevalam, Rabin Kevalam, Rabin Kevalam, Rabin Kevalam.
I'd like to introduce our two panelists. We have Rabin Bangaar down in Melbourne, and Rabin stood as a candidate for an animal rights party recently. And we have Vimukti Warr, who's somewhere in North Victoria. And Vimukti is a harpist, and she does music therapy for animals in refuge centers, animal refuges. So I'd like to start with you, Rabin. Um, can you tell us how you got involved with animal rights activism and went all the way to actually standing as a candidate in a political party?
Sure. I think it was mainly due to my spiritual awakening. And I believe that Ananda Marga played a vital role in my spiritual awakening, where, instead of having conditional compassion, so I would, just look at animals differently from, within the animal kingdom, just looking at different animals differently. And, by having a spiritual awakeness, awakening, sorry, it actually made me realize that everything has the same value. And through that, I decided to actually becoming more actively involved with that because I felt the animals don't actually have a voice to protest against any harm being done to them, and I wanted to be an advocate for their voice, and that was the inspiration that drove me to try and make a difference. Um, the other aspect is I was also touched by so many other people that was so committed to that. Animal welfare was another factor that played a part in my life to move me towards this, to become more active in animal welfare. And I guess the third would be the fact that there was actually a political party that was actually standing for animal rights. It's never been done in the history of Australia, where a party has actually won seats, and actually has made a difference in the animal welfare industry. And it was so inspiring to see that this organization is actually making grounds with that. Um, and I guess the last thing that really inspired me was the fact that I'm well aware of the impact of animal welfare and the rest of uh, the world in terms of climate and humanity. I think if you start looking after our animals, and they are our companions, and they have a right just like every other living being, was the other driving force.
Hmm. Can you tell us something about the political campaign? What were your objectives and how did you get on?
Sure. So I actually joined the party as a volunteer, and I was the treasurer of the Victorian Committee of Management for the Animal Justice Party. It's a national party, but we have chapters in each state, and I volunteered to become a treasurer, and I held that position within the Committee of Management. And one of the driving forces that inspired me to take up the candidacy for the Melbourne City local elections was the horse-drawn carts that they have in Melbourne. And we were getting emails from all over the world, and including all over Australia, saying that we need to stop this cruel practice because those horses go through such uh, pain and abuse that we wanted to bring that. And that was one of the agenda items that I had if I was selected to be a councillor on the Melbourne City Council. Um, and you know, we do have at the Animal Justice Party, we do have you know, really good policies, and they're all about, and the, you know, it's all about kindness, equality, non-racialism, and you know, empathy. So we have you know, a really good policies around that, and that embraces all of neo-humanism in the policies.
Okay, thank you. I will include a link to your party and activities at the bottom. Vimukti, can you tell us about your journey with the harp and how you were drawn to work at animal refuge centres?
Well, I've actually always been an animal advocate all my adult life. That started when I was in my early 20s. And so it's just been a natural progression for me to actually do whatever I can to work with animals. And I was actually, when I became a harp therapist in 2018, at the time I was doing voluntary work at a wildlife shelter in Victoria, mostly working with kangaroos. And I just took my harp along with me one day to just to see what the response would be like. And it was really incredible. We were all really quite amazed. And so I just continued doing that. And then from there, it's just organically grown into me being able to do, to work with animals, you know, that I have such a passion to be working with, and doing the harp as well, and in a therapeutic way, not just to provide music, but to actually be able to provide the appropriate music that's needed in that particular environment for that particular animal. But it's been it's been a lifetime of progression or evolution for me. Yeah.
So how do you get feedback or response from animals? What actually, you know, what do you look for, or how do you feel that your music is getting across?
Yeah. Oh, look, there's quite a few different ways, Dada. But one of the really obvious, I mean, you look for signs in their physical responses at how they're breathing, just like you would with a human. It's not actually working with animals, to me, is not actually different, especially with harp therapy, is to working with humans. And so the obvious things, you look for the breathing rate. How are they breathing? What are their eyes doing? Or what are their other, are they being agitated with the way they're moving around, or are they, you know, totally relaxed? And I'm fortunate that, well, no, I've actually, although I can give you some interesting stories, but, you know, sometimes I have animals just totally run away from me. Like if they're in the paddock, I think, and I try not to take it personally. It's just sort of like, oh, well, that day they want to be running around more than they want to be sort of, you know, being chilled out with the harp playing. But more often than not, I actually play with animals who are really quite traumatized, who might have just come into one of the refuges, and we want to try to relax them, and we want to try to get them used to a human presence. So I always try to sit as far away from them as possible, unless we know that they're okay for me to sit really quite close to them. But more often than not, they'll come to me, and that's what we do. We let them make the decision. You know, I let them make the decision of whether to come close to me or not. And they may lay down next to me. They may just stand there and look at me. But often, you know, the eyes will start to close, and that's a really good sign that they're starting to go into a deep relaxed state. And even if sometimes they might even go to sleep, which means that they're able to actually let go. They're able to really totally relax. And to me, that's a wonderful thing. But sometimes also I might be with, for instance, a sheep who is suffering more than we can help it to overcome. And so the decision might get made that they have to be you know, euthanized, because it's the kindest thing to do. And so I might sit with them and put one hand on their body just so that they can feel my love, and I'll chant to them the Baba Nam Kevalam. And I might just do that, or I might play the harp. It just depends on the situation. But it's amazing how relaxed they are in that presence, because they can usually, you know, one thing I've learned about animals is that they can pick up so much more because their senses are so much more alert than what us humans, you know, we rely on certain senses more, you know, than others, you know, but the animals, they can actually pick, what I found is they can actually pick up even things like in my mind, you know, they can pick up on that. They can pick up on my fear. They can pick up when I'm just trying to relax or when I try to still my mind. They can pick up on everything. And so I try to actually, you know, empty my mind and just either have the Babanam Kavalam going, or I just try to keep it empty and just, I just love you. I just want you to, you know, to have the best situation possible. And I believe that they actually can feel that.
So the animals that we're dealing with would be mostly farm animals. How would they have ended up in those refuges?
Well, oh God, don't get. Gee, it's just you cannot believe the type of scenarios that animals get subjected to because of human mistreatment, ignorance, cruelty, you name it. Just conditioning. You cannot imagine. I mean, okay. A couple of weeks ago, I was working with an animal who'd come in just the day before at one of the farm. So I work at a farm animal sanctuary called Edgar's Mission. It's quite well. It's getting much more known now, but they really love to have an enrichment program for the animals. Thus, that's why I'm there with the harp. They also have some people going there to breed the animals because, again, it's to get them used to human contact, because being on a farm where we're trying to be kind to them, they need to get used to us, and some of them are not. And some animals are only used to being mistreated, you know, so they're and of course humans are, and well, most animals, we are their biggest predator, you know, so and in these animals' cases who end up at the sanctuary, we have probably mistreated them somewhere. So the sheep came in and it had actually been mauled by some animal attack. So it wasn't actually, or maybe it was I don't know whether it had been abandoned or by its guardian, I don't know, but it had been, whether it was dogs or foxes, I don't know. But I was asked to go and sit with her and play for her. And but she had, you know, wounds all over her body, and how she made it, it's really quite amazing. But she came up to me and she sniffed the harp and she sniffed me, and then she laid down and she got to the state where she started to fall asleep. And I just felt really, really blessed, because, you know, after what she'd been through, just, you know, whether she came in the day before when the attack happened somewhere within 24 hours. So, you know, but a lot of animals get found just dumped. They just get dumped, like an old sheep might just get dumped because the person who has them doesn't want to put any energy into it.
Yeah, I'd like to hone in on this.
Sorry, Dada?
I'd like to hone in on this area of how we have one kind of attitude towards animals that we use for farming, and a completely different treatment of animals that we use as pets. But
can I
both you know, there is no difference in terms of the intelligence or the ability of one animal, say a farm animal, to feel pain and fear. It's the same as a dog or a cat. So this is where we're at the moment in society, in general, society at large, that we have no problem empathizing with the needs of dogs and cats and animals that we have chosen to be our companions. We have no problem ascribing feelings to them, and even almost human status to them, and completely ignoring the emotional needs and well-being of animals that we use in factory situations.
Well, actually, most animals are not protected by the in Australia are not protected by animal welfare legislation. that are set up to protect dogs and cats. Like there's something like 500, I think there's approximately about 500 million animals for food or production in Australia that are excluded from any protections of animal welfare. That's just horrendous, isn't it? So, you might be surprised to hear that like pigs are not protected from any form of cruelty. There's no protection whatsoever for a pig. They, with cows, chickens, sheep, and other farmed animals, are specifically excluded from the animal cruelty laws that protect our cats and dogs. And yet, what's really interesting, we all, as living beings, we all value our own individual life, so, and we all know what it's like to suffer.
Yeah.
As we all know what it's like to feel happiness. I mean, a cow loves to feel the sun on its back. It loves to eat some lovely grass. I mean, if you see a little lamb, you see them when they're really in the sun and it's a warmish day and they're with their mums and they have their little nurseries that naturally these animals create. You see them spring around and they're just happy, and it's just incredible to think that we do not think that they have the right to be protected because we see them for food, as a food source or some kind of production source, and that's it.
Yeah, and we get that at some point we become acclimatized to that in our acculturation, our culture. I don't know at what point it happens, but at some point, you're read stories as a kid about cute little animals. And I remember when I was a kid, my dad used to read The Wind in the Willows. And it's about these cute little animals, and including horses, ponies, frogs, and all. But they go out on a picnic one day, and the story describes what they have in their picnic basket, and it's all cold hams and corned beef and all this sort of thing. And so somehow you become used to the idea that that's food. Even though there's a contradiction there, you sort of even in your child's mind, you start to just learn this is normal, this is the reality.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, you have to disconnect somehow. There must be some disconnect between your natural empathy, the natural empathy that the story is creating, that these are characters, they're talking, they're moving about and living their lives.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to switch that off. The culture switches off your empathy towards the conditions of pigs and cows and sheep and all of that.
Yeah. Well, I know I came from a farming family. I mean, my parents were not farmers, but my aunties and uncles were farmers, and we came from the country in New South Wales, and we were taught that the animals were here for us, that they were lower in the pecking order, and they were here for us humans. That was their purpose in life, was for us, for our food. They were our food chain, nothing else. They were here for our food. And so when you get, sorry?
I believe that there's some reference in the Bible as well that animals are there for food.
Yeah.
They're there for your to use as you would.
So even if you're a child with those innocent eyes, where you get to know what you just get to love for the sake of loving any being. But if you get that story being told for people that you respect, that you love and respect, and who are often the people you want to be like, then over time, yes, I think it's as you said, you lose that that initial love, and you. I don't know if it's disconnection, but it is It's almost like a brainwash. I'm sorry, it's almost like a brainwashing. I should probably say that, but I feel that that's what it's like. It's like, no, but they're here for you. They're here. Just love them, love that little pig, but that little pig's going to end up on the table. You know, or love that little chicken, but it's going to end up on the table. And in actual fact, we're going to get you to come and help us cut off its head. You know, like, and then get you to help. You know, and then that's just you just grow up having to do that.
Yeah.
And so you know, and it's just it's just a thing. I mean, for me, I didn't stop thinking like that until I was in my late teens, when I started realizing that animals were not being treated very nicely. Like there was battery farming happening for chickens in Australia at the time, and cows are starting to get pumped with hormones to produce more milk, and plus all the calves were taken away from their mothers so that they could get milk for us humans, you know. And then there was in the early 80s, there was this, you know, huge mass production of milk, and because of all this overproduction and for profit, that any excess was getting dumped into the ocean. Now, to me, as a young maturing person, I couldn't make any sense of that whatsoever. As much as they told us that they're here for our food source, I couldn't understand, well, why are we then dumping it? Why are we taking calves away or lambs away from their mothers, you know, all that type of stuff, and then, you know, creating horrible situations for them, you know, where they don't even get out to feel the sun on their back anymore, or, you know, all this battery farming that happens now, even in Australia with our cows, you know, it's just I don't know, it's unthinkable.
Rabin,
and of course, children are actually some of the best advocates.
Rabin in. Sorry, there's a bit of delay, so I just want to queue up Rabin. In terms of strategy, where is the focus for your party, and how do you go about getting the message out to the public?
So the main thing is having good policies and engaging a range of media, publicizing the philosophy and policies out in the media, running campaigns, and the third thing is actually having a whole range of volunteers to be able to get the message across. Now, being a political party, of course, we are funded by federal funding and state funding. So, you know, we use that to basically run our campaigns. The second thing is, of course, that you know, we have a strong presence wherever there's abuse. So you know, if we target like factory farming, or we target you know, the ocean where there's exploitation of fishing, or culling of kangaroos, you know, koalas. So we target these main areas to try and, you know, basically get bang for buck. And then, of course, we also engage with the other parties. We engage with the other parties to try and at least get some of our policies through. So because we're a minority party.
Sorry, Rabin, can I just butt in there? If you could park up for a minute and turn on your light, your inside light.
Yeah, sure.
Just the light has faded on us as we were talking.
Okay, look, if you can give me 3 minutes,
sure,
I'll actually be in my house. Okay. So I have plenty of light. Is that okay?
All right, go for it. Yeah.
I'm gonna just rush straight through into the house, and then we'll have uninterrupted time.
Okay, good.
Okay. Thanks.
So Rabin is
So, Dada, can I just mention? Sorry.
yeah, he's on a food delivery run. He also does food service to underprivileged families in Melbourne. So he's just finishing his run now. Go ahead, Vimukti.
Oh, so one thing I'd like to say is that there's been a lot of studies with animals in music, and most of the research shows that music can affect an animal's mood in much the same way that it affects humans. So that when dogs, cats and cows, horses, even kangaroos, and other species hear classical music, for instance, it has quite a soothing effect and they become quite relaxed. And if they play loud, thrashing, heavy metal music, it can really rile them up, just pretty much like it does with humans. Like, it can make us quite anxious and agitated. I just wanted to mention that because I realised I didn't mention that when I was talking about
Okay.
music and animals. Yeah. That's all. Yeah. I'm also a member of the Animal Justice Party, Ballarat.
Okay, that's Rabin's party, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I don't volunteer, but I'm a member of the Animal Justice Party.
All right. Yeah, there's certainly a place for legislative pressure, because you can see that if you read the preamble to animal rights legislation, you can see that it started off with very well intentioned and acknowledging that animals are sentient beings. But you can see by the time that any legislation is actually passed in the animal welfare space, you can see that you can almost imagine the committee stages that it went through. The interests of farmers, factory farming, and so by the time it's been through all of that, then all of those exceptions that you talked about earlier, they have been mentioned in the legislation. So so really, if I think if people were aware of this duality that we have, that we live, and started to think about it more, and people are starting to think about it more. A lot of it is coming from the environmental movement, because it's well known now, it's well established that a lot of the pressure that we're putting on the planet comes from our approach to food, that we, instead of eating primary food, we raise animals for food, and that's a lot more, it puts a lot more pressure on the limited resources of the earth, water,
Yes.
soil fertility, all of that, than just growing primary food for us. So people are coming to animal welfare, or they're coming to vegetarianism and veganism from that direction. So it seems like there's that is a powerful wave, and also people becoming more aware of the cruelty that is inherent in raising animals in factory farming conditions. So it seems like I think we can expect more and more in the future. We can expect better legislation. We can expect, especially from the climate point of view, because governments all over the world, they're signing up to climate agreements, and so they have to reduce their carbon emissions, and you just can't ignore the biggest, producer of carbon emissions is the food industry in the way that we do it now. So I was wondering again, Rabin, I just wanted to, because you actually stood as a candidate for local council, is that right?
Correct, in the City of Melbourne council election.
So local councils, I mean, part of their agenda, part of their forward planning must be carbon reduction. So
Yes.
is there any, do they plan for, say, the reduction of our reliance on animals in farming? Do they actually plan for that? Do they discuss it even?
Not enough. They are more concerned about domestic animals. So there's a it's called DAMP, which is a domestic animal management system that they have to domestic animal management program that they have in their policies that they want to manage, because at the moment, we've got so much of abuse in factory farms, but we also have a lot of neglect in the domestic animal arena, where if you lose your dog and if you don't collect it from a refuge place within 2 days, they euthanize them, and the same with cats, and so that was also part of the agenda to address that. But unfortunately, they always talk about waste and recycling, etc. So from a climate change environmental policy, they have that, but there's nothing really about factory farming as such. So but because there's always this bigger picture from just being a councillor to moving to state politics and to federal politics, then you get the influence sort of going both ways to try and influence a lot more people. I would add that I've actually put my name in to be a federal election candidate.
Okay.
For the Animal Justice Party. I'm just being interviewed in the next couple of weeks to see if they're going to accept me as a candidate in the Senate or in the lower house. But we are actually targeting a lot of the marginal seats to try and.
How close did you get to representation in the last elections?
How many?
How close? Do you have any candidates, or how close did you get to having a candidate?
In the local elections, we got 2 new candidates in Victoria, and actually the interesting part was one is in Bendigo, and the other one is in the Alpine Shire.
Okay.
And these are conservative areas that there's a lot of farming happening, but we actually got 2 candidates in.
So you actually got 2 candidates elected.
Yeah, we got 2 candidates elected.
Yeah.
I was a bit unfortunate because I actually had enough votes to win, but through the preferencing, the person that came behind me had 300 votes, and through preferencing, he ended up with 10,000 votes, and then he just went over me to win the election. So, but yeah, so we have 2 candidates in. And from a state point of view, we've got Senate positions in Victoria and 2 in New South Wales.
Sure. I just want to read you something I just saw today. This is from Berkeley, California. And in 2018, they adopted a Vegan Monday, which was to encourage people, this is from city council level, encouraging people to try Meatless Monday. So they're actually, and they call it the Green Monday resolution. So they're making that connection between going green, going towards a vegan diet, and meeting these requirements of, these environmental requirements. So they also, I'm just scrolling through this article here. So they've also started to replace in their own institutions, any institutions where they are supplying food, like jails or schools, or old folks home. They have started replacing meat with vegan meat.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, this probably wouldn't have been, I wouldn't have imagined it 10 years ago, but
Correct.
it's coming, it's
Mm.
becoming.
Well, to be a member of the Animal Justice Party, you have to be vegan as a minimum.
Yeah.
And, just reflecting on what you're saying, we have affiliation through other organizations throughout the world. And I know in Germany, the parliament had made a decision to go vegetarian.
Wow.
I saw an article about that. So there's
So
definitely a
sorry, you said, is that coming from environmental reasons?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So there is that change. I think there's a lift in spiritual intelligence that's happening, and people are wanting to starting to make a difference, and it's mainly among the young, teenagers and people that go to universities that are actually awakening, and they are our future. So if they have that, it sounds so positive for humanity if they have that sort of attributes and attitude.
Yeah.
But in saying all of that, it's really tough, in Parliament to try and get some of our policies through. But a good example is duck shooting, which is such a, in this day and age in Victoria, we're the only state that does allow that. But we are fighting to get that banned, and there's no reason why in this modern era that we actually still do something as cruel as duck shooting.
Yeah.
There's really not much to eat off them. They just lean wild birds that and yet they keep claiming that they want to eat it, but I just think it's sport. But we still go out there and campaign and make it as hard as possible for them, have footage of abuse, and we're working very closely with the Victorian government to ban that. So I would say by the next year or so, it will actually not be allowed in Victoria, which is a really big win for us.
If you had to hold up something inspiring in terms of animal rights, something inspiring from Australia, what would it be?
I would say the fight against the culling of kangaroos and koalas, because that resonates with us. It's our national emblem, and they're recognized throughout the world, and I think that's the one that really resonates with our outcry throughout the world.
So
So I think
there's a program for culling koalas.
Yes, in some places they do. Sometimes they do it from a conservation point of view, because there's enough food, and they actually starve. So that's a point to that. But they can be rehoused and things like that, which is sometimes difficult. But the culling of kangaroos is, to me, it's a big issue that we can actually work around it by rehousing them, etc. They're a bit adaptable, but through the housing, the expansion of housing development, etc., we are keep moving them further and further away, with less places for them to actually lead a good life. So that's always a challenge. And I think the fight against this puppy farms, lots of abuse happening in there, and the horse racing is another area that we focus on, and we always protest against that cruel sport. But I think the kangaroos is the one that gets the world outcry.
How big of
Yeah,
an issue for the Animal Justice Party is the routinized day-to-day cruelty of animals in factory farming?
Sorry, could you just repeat that?
How much of an issue is it for the Animal Justice Party how animals are abused in factory farming?
Oh, it's a big deal, and hence we stipulate we need to, we all have to be vegans, because there is the most cruelty, especially in the dairy industry. The amount of cruelty there, and the so yes, it's a big thing for us, and we work with other affiliated organizations that, like, there's an organization called Farms Transparency that go out and actually monitor what's happening in these farms and highlight cruelty. Yep, it's high on our agenda, but it's a challenging one to get through Parliament, because we've got the major parties that are not in line with some of our policies. But we will continue to actively try and get as much of that down. And the other thing is, of course, we are fighting against live export. There's a lot of cruelty in there, and we've had some wins with that. But we'll continue to campaign to have that completely banned. So some good work around factory farming and live exports.
Okay, lastly, I'd like you both to comment on this is a position that we have when we come to this issue from a neo-humanist perspective, that we recognize that animals just like us are here on this earth to develop their potential, and their potential is to grow in consciousness just like ours is. So this is something that I think will come about in the future when we do recognize the sentience, recognizing the sentience of all creatures. But I'd like you both to comment on what do you visualize in the future of human-animal relations? How do we relate to animals in an ideal future?
that's a hard question, Dada, when there's so much
Like
work still.
presently, at present, we tend to look at only at the utility value of animals. We just even animals that we have as companions, they are there because we get something out of them. But when we actually see them as beings with their own potential, then how does that shift the way that we relate to animals?
I think the only way.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, please go ahead.
No, you go, please.
I think neo-humanism is the key for that. I think if people understand neo-humanism, it goes well beyond domestic animals and factory farming. It's the oneness of that philosophy that has a shift in the mind about the oneness and how every living being is equal. It's the lifting of the mind from gross to subtle through the philosophy of neo-humanism will get us where we need to be to recognize it beyond what we know today, which is factory farming and domestic animals. But they actually all are sentient beings, is the way I see it.
Vimukti?
Yeah, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with what Rabin just commented on. I also believe it's a proutist. It comes into proutist policies and appreciation as well, because when we stop expecting something or someone to be here for our profit, because as long as we are making a profit out of someone else's existence, we adopt inhumane practices. We can become quite greedy. It's human nature. And so I think, when we can apply the politics behind so like with legislations and whatnot, then we can actually get to a place where we're no longer looking to make a profit, that the animals are no longer here for our food and our production. When we are equal, when we humans no longer expect animals to do what we want them to do, to be how we want them to be. Just like if we stop doing that to each other, then I think we can expect a greater existence, a greater way of being for all.
Well, it opens the scope for us to understand them better. What are their needs, and perhaps provide better for their needs of growth and consciousness for a start.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we've covered the base.
Yep.
Anybody anything else?
Yes. Look, I just want to add that I am speaking not as a representation of Animal Justice Party, but as Rabin, because we have protocols that we have to abide by in terms of talking on behalf of an Animal Justice Party, and I need to have that endorsed by the party before I can represent them. So I just thought I'd put that disclaimer in.
Sure. Okay. Good.
And can I also say, I'm actually, I don't volunteer in the Animal Justice Party, but I am a member of the Animal Justice Party because I do like their policies. And I've been a member for about 3 years now. When I first saw that they were running in the first election that I saw them, I thought, oh, what on earth is this? I thought it was probably some right-wing thing. And I didn't even give them any credibility at all. But then I decided afterwards, I thought, well, Animal Justice Party, maybe it is about, a good cause, and so I actually looked further into it. And I thought, oh yes, I have to make sure that I help them to survive, because I'd like to see where they go. And it's not just about animal rights; it is about environmental. It's so much more. It's so much more, and it's growing and growing all the time. It's evolving.
Okay, so shall we go out on a little kirtan?
Sounds good.
Good. Thank you both very much.
Thank you to both of you as well.
Kevalam Baba, Baba Nam Kevalam, Baba Kevalam Baba, Baba Nam Kevalam, Baba Nam Kevalam Baba, Baba Nam Kevalam Baba, Baba Nam Kevalam, Pavanam Kevalam Kevalam Baba Pavanam Kevalam Kevalam Baba Pavanam Kevalam Pavanam Kevalam Baba Pavanam